Let's make a start. Hello and welcome everybody to the membership event for Northamptonshire Healthcare NHS Foundation Trust, or NHFT. My name's Richard. I work in the corporate governance team, and I'm really pleased to be hosting this afternoon's event, and also to welcome Nicola and Tom from the IAPT service to take us through a session on stress awareness. It certainly feels like a really topical subject for me. Hopefully it's of interest to you too. I think we've got a reasonable amount of time allocated this afternoon. For those that have been to these sessions before, you'll know the format that we tend to use, which is we'll have some input from the presenters, Nicola and Tom in this case, about the topic, and then we'll open out to a general question and answer type session a little bit later on. What we would ask is that if you're not invited to come into the meeting to talk, if you could just keep your microphone on mute, it just minimises the background noise and helps everybody to get the best out of the session. We are using the chat function this afternoon, so if you think of a question that you'd like to pose, by all means pop it into the chat. We'll do our best to pick up all of the questions as we go, but I know some of the sessions get a bit busy, so if for whatever reason we don't come to your question in the course of the Q&A, we'll look to get back to you after the meeting and pick up any outstanding points in that way. So I think with that, I will hand over then to Nicola and Tom to take us through the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. So just to introduce myself, my name's Tom Finnegan. I'm an assistant psychologist at Talking Therapies Northants. And if you want to introduce yourself, Nicola, as well.
Thank you, Tom. Yeah, my name's Nicola Phillips. I'm a CBT therapist and a clinical lead from IAPT.
So to give you a brief overview of what we'll be covering today, we'll speak a bit more about what stress is, some of the symptoms that you might have if you are stressed. We'll think about actually how we might know if we were feeling stressed. We'll tell you a bit more about cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. We'll introduce kind of a few bits in terms of managing stress, so something called behavioral activation, how this can help with low mood, but also stress as well. So the importance of having kind of really balance of activities in your life. We'll speak a bit about mindfulness and how this can benefit people who are experiencing stress, the benefits of doing mindfulness, and then we'll finish off with a mindful exercise as well. So first of all, what is stress? And a lot of people experience stress day to day, and there are a lot of triggers for stress. So some of the most common ones can involve work, money matters, which is a really big one at the moment with the cost of living crisis. It could be relationships with anyone in your life, whether that's your partners, children, other family members, maybe friends. It can also be caused by major upheavals, whether that's moving house, difficulties in relationships, the loss of loved ones, any major life events really, but also minor irritations, such as feeling on the values, having arguments with people, especially if you've got a lot of those kind of bigger life events going on. Those smaller irritations can seem a lot bigger as well. It is important to acknowledge that some stress can be positive. There's I think we don't have a picture of it here, but it's called the stress normality curve. So if you have not enough stress in your life, then actually it can be really hard to get things done. There's no real rush to do things. So there's an optimal amount of stress. So moderate level stress can make us perform better, but when we start to go over those moderate levels, that's where it starts to have a negative impact on us. And stress is only healthy as if it's short-lived. So if we're consistently stressed, if we're excessively stressed, it can lead us to feel ill, because there are some very physical symptoms when you do feel stressed as well, same as if you do feel anxious or depressed. And that can lead to emotional exhaustion as well, as this impacts other areas of your life. So just to take you through kind of a case example of someone who's stressed, obviously all identifiable information has been changed here. This is Craig, and Craig was a healthcare assistant working at a local hospital. His son had been born a year ago, and in that time he'd noticed he'd actually started to feel really big build-up of stress. He's finding it harder to organize himself, And all those added duties of being a father, with responsibilities of making sure they're fed, washed, the impact on the sleep as well. All of these meant he started to do things such as forgetting his keys, misplacing his phone, and sometimes forgetting to bring nappies or snacks when he was out with his baby. He was also feeling more irritable, and he noticed he was bickering more with his partner. And because of the stress as well, finding it hard to manage these things, he noticed he'd been later to work more often as well. His sleep was poor, and that meant he became more forgetful, actually more likely to be late. So actually all of these symptoms just started to impact on each other. So we asked Craig, what does stress mean to you? And this is what he said. I constantly feel overwhelmed at the moment. I feel like I'm failing both as a dad and a healthcare assistant. I look at other people who also work and have children, and they seem to cope so much better than I do, which makes me feel so much worse. Although I feel exhausted all the time, when it comes to bedtime, I lie there wide awake, worrying about all the mistakes I've made. I stopped going out with my friends and started feeling in sick at work. Why can't I cope like everyone else? And some of you may identify with Craig here. If you do, put in the comments, say actually, this resonates with me. Some of you might not, but this is just how one person experiences stress, because we all experience this differently.
I'm going to talk to you a little bit about normalizing stress and looking at some, well, it's not that recent actually, but some data from a few years ago. So research has shown that around 12 million adults in the UK speak to their GP, and most of these are suffering from anxiety and depression, which is related to stress. So 526,000 workers suffer from work-related stress, depression or anxiety. That was taken from 2016 to 2017, which equates to 12.5 million working days lost due to work-related stress, depression or anxiety in that year of 2016 to 2017. So we can see it's very common. Lots of people out there feeling stress.
I think especially with everything that's happened over the past 2.5 years, those numbers probably only increased, haven't they?
Yeah, I imagine they're higher than what they were a few years ago. Yeah. So looking at the symptoms of stress, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the emotional symptoms first. So people will tend to feel overwhelmed, irritable and wound up. They may feel anxious or fearful of the future. They may also find themselves lacking in self-esteem if they are experiencing stress. It doesn't just impact our emotions, it impacts our whole body. So it will impact us physically as well. So we'll also experience some physical feelings. So some of these are described as headaches we might notice. We might have muscle tension or pain. We may even feel dizzy. We'll experience sleep problems. We might feel tired. We might also find we're eating more or perhaps eating less because of the stress. It will affect our emotions, it will affect our body, but it's also going to impact how we think about things as well. So we might notice in times of stress that our thoughts begin to race. They're a lot quicker. We might find that we're constantly worrying about what if this happens, what if that happens. And because of all of this, it's going to make it difficult to focus and concentrate on things. And that may also lead to making decisions difficult. It might take us longer to make decisions. Things that we would have done straight away, we can find that actually it's taken us a lot longer to do. So we've looked at how it impacts our emotions, how it impacts our body, how it impacts how we think, but it will also change how we behave as well. So quite often when people are feeling stressed, they might find themselves drinking or smoking more. They might become quite irritable towards others. So you might notice you'll be snapping more. Or they might avoid doing things. So doing things that they normally enjoy, they might start to stop or spending time with other people.
So all of this kind of builds into what we call kind of a CBT cycle, or kind of 5 areas kind of formulation. So you'll notice all of these areas that Nicola outlined in terms of, you know, the emotional response, the physical response in the body, different thoughts, and the behavior. And the reason we have this kind of CBT cycle, or kind of 5 areas, is to actually highlight how these things all impact on each other. And that brings us kind of onto CBT now. So there's a few kind of real core concepts to understand behind CBT. The first is that it works more on the belief that it's not necessarily always an event or a situation in itself that leads somebody to feel distressed. In fact, quite often it's how that person views or interprets that event or the situation. So two people could be in the same situation, but see it different, completely different, and one person might feel more distressed, whereas one person might be more able to accept what's happening in that situation. The next kind of real core concept is the interaction between thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and behaviors. And these can all influence each other to really cause stress or maintain stress. And again, it's going back to this kind of interaction between these areas. So if you feel more exhausted, or if you feel more stressed, you know, you might be more likely to do something that can help in the short term, such as having a drink, but actually long term that might make you feel more anxious or more stressed the next day. And just telling yourself to, you know, feel better, to calm down or relax isn't that easy. And quite often if people tell you to calm down or relax when you're already feeling stressed, it actually leads you to feel worse. So what CBT does is it provides you with tools and techniques to change what you do, to change how you think, to help manage that stress, to improve your mood and reduce anxiety. So again, it's helping you look at this cycle here and learning different techniques how you break that cycle.
So one of the key behavioural techniques that we'll use in CBT is behavioural activation. So this is a technique that looks to reintroduce activities back into your life in a balanced way to help break that cycle of inactivity. We know that when people are feeling stressed, when they're feeling low, they tend to stop doing the things that they used to do that kept them well. So actually getting back to that is a really good way to break that cycle. And usually when we're feeling low, we tend to feel really tired, and people will feel that they need to rest because they're feeling tired. However, what we know is that you need the opposite. Activity is probably one of the best ways to treat that. If we feel tired, if we want to feel more energized, you know, we need to do more. Doing more will give you more energy. So that's why we use behavioural activation. If we can plan in to do the things that we know make us feel better, we're going to feel re-energized, and our mood is going to lift, and we'll feel less stressed as well. But it's not just doing any old thing. Really, we need a range of different activities in our life. So we've separated these into 3 main categories. And the reason why we need a range of activity is, as humans, we don't just need one source of occupation. We need that balance of occupation to keep us happy and content in lives. So the categories that we've separated them into are routine, necessary, and pleasurable. And it will be different for everyone. So other people will need more of one and less of the other. So it's going to be individual for us all, but it is about getting a balance unique to us to keep us content. So routine, these are things that you may do day to day or week to week, such as housework, cooking, or shopping. Necessary activities, these are things that we have to do, such as paying bills, taking children to school. And then pleasurable. So these are things that we get enjoyment from, such as meeting up with friends, exercising, listening to music. It will be different for everyone, but it's having that range, having that balance of activity to keep us well.
I think with especially pleasurable as well, I read a research article recently that said actually if our hobbies are very different from what we do for our occupation, actually it has a huge improvement on our mental health as well.
Yeah. And I think when we are stressed, it's usually the pleasurable activities that tend to, stop. Oh, I haven't got time to go to yoga. I haven't got time to meet up with so-and-so. It can be that area of activity that tends to get overlooked when we are feeling stressed. So one of the ways that we can start to get a good balance in our lives is to plan. So activity scheduling. So, you can do this anyway, but planning things in, there's a lot of research found that if you've written it down, you've planned it, you're much more likely to do it. Whereas if you just say, oh, I might try and meet so-and-so on Saturday morning and go for a walk. Actually, if you've not planned it, if you haven't written it down, it's probably not likely to happen. So writing things down, planning them, and then you can also see what kind of activity you've got across your week. If you are working Monday to Friday, that's a huge chunk of your week taken up with that. So it's making sure you're balancing that out with things that you might enjoy in the evening or things over the weekend as well. So it's a really good way to achieve that balance of activities across the week using activity scheduling. So we've got an example, another case study here of Paula's story. So I'll read this out to you. Paula is 44 and works at a prominent university. She's a manager of her department, a department which is going through a lot of changes. Her workload has increased, but her team has been affected by redundancies. Paula has a lot of targets to hit and is under pressure by her line manager to increase her department's work rate. She's spending more and more time at the office, working through a break and coming home late, and often continues her work into the early hours of the morning. She feels her staff are already overworked and has stopped delegating tasks to them, choosing instead to try and finish them herself.
So again, it could be that some of you identify more with Paula than Craig, and again, it's showing this idea like everyone experiences stress in different ways as well.
So this is how Paula described what stress meant to her when she was asked. So she said, by the time I come home, my children are often in bed, and if they aren't, I still don't see them much as I lock myself away in the spare room working on my laptop. At the weekends, I'm so exhausted. I just feel empty, and by Saturday night, I'm already worrying about Monday morning again. My sleep is terrible, and this makes me ratty with my husband and children. I then end up feeling guilty as well. I really don't like myself at the moment. So I think that description from Paula, we can hear a lot of the symptoms of stress in there that she's described about how she's feeling and how she's reacting and what she's doing to others as well.
So if we start to think a bit more about the actual physical stress response now, this is called the fight or flight response. And this is something that we all have built into us, and it is designed to keep us safe. So imagine if a great big grizzly bear was to burst into your room right now. Rightly so, you're going to be terrified, and your body needs to get you ready to deal with that threat. And you're either going to fight that bear, which might not be the best idea, or you're going to want to run away from that bear. So your body needs you to get ready to do all of these things, and that's when the amygdala kind of kicks in. It picks up on a threat, so then it makes changes to the body, so your body's ready for action. So your body's ready to either fight or to run away. And obviously, in the world we live in now, we don't often come across threats like bears, lions, or threats from rival tribes. But what we interpret as threat now is more often activated by maybe work stress, worries about our health or about social events. It could be bills, amongst many other factors, and you'll know what leads you to feel more stressed. But it could just start with, I suppose, getting an email from your boss saying we need to speak later, which leads you to start to feel stressed. And even if that meeting goes okay, you might still be in that state of arousal. And maybe when you're going home late, it's still impacting on your ability to relax or to sleep as well. So if we start to think about, I suppose, what your body does to get you ready to deal with that. And Nicola mentioned a lot of those physical sensations earlier, but all of these things happen for a reason. If you think if you need to run or to fight, your blood's going to need to start pumping faster, so your heart goes faster. Your breathing will become quicker and shallowing, almost as a response to that, to try and keep the blood oxygenated. And all that blood will be pumped to, your big muscles groups, whatever you need to fight or to run away. So your shoulders, your neck, your back, maybe your upper legs or your upper arms. So you might notice some tension, maybe some shaking there as well, or maybe some pain. It's being drawn away from areas you don't need as much, such as your digestive system, your bladder. So you might feel a little bit sick, you might get butterflies, you might even need the toilet more. There might be changes to your vision as you become more focused on what you believe to be a threat or your escape route. So all of these things happen for a reason, designed to keep you safe. And quite often people do find them distressing, but it's important to remember that they aren't harmful, they're not dangerous. They are designed there to keep you safe.
So because some of the symptoms we get of anxiety do feel distressing, even though they're all perfectly safe, actually when they're in our bodies, when we're experiencing them, we can find it quite distressing. So we often find ways to deal with that. And we'll develop strategies to cope with that stress that often don't help us in the long run. They usually come under two categories, which we've identified here as controlling and avoidance strategies. So the controlling ones are ways to bring those horrible symptoms of stress down. So this might be using alcohol, it might be caffeine, it could be cannabis or other recreational or prescribed drugs. In the long term, though, this way of controlling the symptoms can often lead to poor physical health and also mental health as well, could even lead to addiction. The other key one that we see is avoidance. So this is where we try to avoid stress and to try to avoid feeling overwhelmed. So this means we might delay doing things, delay making that phone call, delay paying that bill, delay completing important tasks because we're worried we won't be able to cope. Actually, what's going to happen is that the stress will build up. The more we avoid, the more it will build, and it will just create more stress. So we're continuing in that cycle of stress there.
So we've spoken about a way to manage the behavioral side of stress, and what we want to give you now is a way to actually manage those physical sensations as well.
So we're going to talk to you about diaphragm breathing here. So when we are stressed or anxious, our breathing rate increases. This is so that we can send more energy to our muscles to get us ready for action. But most situations that make us anxious and stressed, although they are psychologically threatening, we're not actually in any real physical danger. Because we're not fighting or running away from anything, we're actually we're often hyperventilating or breathing faster, which means we're taking in more oxygen than we actually need. So our levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide are no longer balanced, and this can leave us feeling not great. So diaphragm breathing is a really great way to help regulate the breathing and get that balance back. It trains us to breathe more deeply and more effectively and to prevent that hyperventilating. And this will reduce the likelihood then of triggering other symptoms and reduce that fight and flight response as well, that stress response that we experience as a physical reaction in our body. Tom's going to talk us through the diaphragm breathing that we can all use to help control this response.
So it's just kind of setting up for this, kind of first of all, getting comfortable where you are, whether you sat down, lying down, stood up, having one hand on your stomach, one hand on your chest. And before we start, I'm just going to explain what we're going to do. We're going to take a big exhale first of all, breathe in for 7, and then breathe out for 11. I'll count you through the first few breaths and encourage you to try a few on your own. And when you're doing this, you should notice that the hand on your stomach moves more than the hand on your chest. It could be that maybe you do have breathing problems or you're not quite used to deep breathing. So if you're really struggling with the 7 and 11, bring it down to 5 or 9, or to whatever feels comfortable for your body. Because really what we're going to try and do is actually slow down the breathing to help kind of bring those kind of physical symptoms down a little, and like Nicola said, try and prevent the triggering of those other symptoms of fight or flight. It could be worth just taking a brief note now of how stressed you feel at this moment, and then maybe again after we do this exercise to see how you feel then. So just a brief moment to note that down for anyone who wants to. And again, setting up, so the one hand on your stomach, one hand on your chest, taking that big exhale first of all, and then breathing in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, in, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And just try a few breaths on your own now, trying to keep that count as well. Okay. So just again, take a note now of how you feel now in comparison to how you felt before. If you did have any difficulties or you do have any comments, please still put them in the chat and we'll come back to them. We'll come to the Q&A a little bit later, but just note how you feel now compared to how you felt beforehand. And we're going to take you through another way now. So we've focused on the behaviors, the physical side, and now thinking a bit more about how we can respond to those thoughts as well by thinking about mindfulness. So a lot of people, when they think about mindfulness, often think, it's about having a completely empty mind, and it's a really common misconception. Mindfulness is about being fully in the present, without judging, allowing thoughts and feelings to come and go without getting caught up in them. And the primary focus when we practice mindful meditation is almost always the breathing. And just with this picture as well, often our bodies are always in the present. We can often find ourselves time traveling, thinking about, what's happening in the future, what may happen, thinking about, what's happened in the past, if you've had a particularly difficult morning. Mindfulness is just about bringing your mind to where your body is as well, in the present. So if you can, you imagine your mind as a raging river of thoughts. There's always thoughts coming and going. But mindfulness teaches us, so rather than being washed downstream by these thoughts, to be able to stand on the bank and observe them rather than being caught up in them. So a few bits in terms of the benefits of mindfulness, it can really help us reduce rumination. So this is when we brood on the negatives. Quite often we feel if we just focus on our problems long enough that we can almost think our way out of it. And often this actually leads us to feel worse. So mindfulness can really help us to kind of take that step back. Of course, if we're more in the present, it's going to be easier to focus on the task at hand and concentrate on what's happening, which will then in turn improve our memory. If we're able to focus on things, it's a little bit easier to memorize them too. And again, the reason, you're all here, it can help to reduce stress and anxiety. If you're able to take that step back from those thoughts and feelings and observe them rather than being washed downstream by them, it can really help to stop you getting caught up in that cycle that we showed you near the beginning of the session. It helps us to be more self-aware and start to understand ourselves a little bit more as well. So we might actually be able to kind of take that step back and see how we want to respond rather than reacting to the moment. It can really help us to appreciate the small things that are happening right now that we so often take for granted. And that could be, actually, you had a really tasty coffee, someone smiled at you on the street, or maybe the sun just hit the tree outside your window perfectly. And these, they all seem like such small moments, but actually having that appreciation of those things, enjoying them mindfully, can really make a big impact on how we feel as well. It helps us to be more compassionate towards ourselves as we actually realize thoughts are just that, thoughts. And when we're more compassionate to ourselves, it also helps us to be more compassionate to others. You may be not as reactive. You might be able to take a step back and respond to people how you'd want to respond to them. And overall, it helps to improve our quality of life and our happiness, as you can see from all the above benefits. So in terms of what being mindfulness, Mark Williams, Professor of Clinical Psychology at the Oxford Mindfulness Centre, put it really well. So it's knowing directly what is going on inside and outside ourselves, moment by moment. So being fully present in the moment. So it's not just being aware of, what's happening all around us, but it's being aware of what's happening within us as well. What thoughts there are, what feelings we have, what's happening within the body. And a really important part of this is doing it without judgment, not judging the experience as good or bad or better than this or worse than that, but just being fully involved in the moment. So by meditating, we're actually able to develop all of these skills. And then that's where we start to get the benefits that we've just been through as well. And the more we meditate, the more easier it is to apply these skills outside of meditation and our everyday life as well. But it's not everything. So it's not a panacea. It's not a cure-all. And to really get the benefits from mindfulness, you would need to meditate regularly. And it's going to be hard at first. Like any new skill, you're not going to be great the first time. It's not a relaxation technique. So it may be relaxing, but mindfulness is a way of seeing the world, and that feeling relaxed is more of a happy accident. Not everyone experiences the benefits that we have outlined, and it's not always beneficial for patients with trauma. However, if it is used as part of an integrated approach by an experienced therapist, it can still be helpful as well.
So let's meditate. We're going a very short meditation exercise with you called the 3-step breathing stage with you today. So I'm going to guide you through this. I'm going to invite you to get yourself comfortable wherever you are. So if you're sitting, having both feet flat on the floor, allowing your hands to rest in your lap, shoulders, allowing them to relax. So perhaps giving them a bit of a shake if there's any tension there. And if you're comfortable to do so, closing your eyes. So becoming aware of your body, sitting, getting ready for the practice, and allowing yourself this time, these few minutes on a Tuesday afternoon, to follow this short guided meditation. The first step of this practice, I'm going to invite you to check in with yourself. So notice what's going on with you today. So noticing your mood, how you're feeling, and any thoughts you've got going round in your mind. Perhaps planning what to do after this, things you've missed from this morning. That might be memories from a while ago. Not doing anything, simply noticing the thoughts you've got and the mood you've got. I'm not trying to change. So just checking in with yourself and noticing what's going on with you. And now inviting you to shift that focus from your mood and thoughts onto your breath. So picking up the breath in your abdomen. So noticing the movement here as you breathe in and your abdomen rises and you breathe out and it falls. So following the movement as you breathe in and you slowly breathe out. Keeping your focus on the breath. And as you're doing this, your mind will wander, and that's okay. Thinking about what you've got to do later, dinner for tonight, school run, wherever it's gone, notice and gently bring it back to focusing on the breath. Simply sitting with the breath and noticing the movement with every new breath in and every new breath out. And with the next breath in, expanding that focus to include the breath and the whole of the body. So widening that focus from the breath and the whole of the body. So almost as if you're breathing into the whole of the body. And being aware of how that feels. Breathing into the whole of the body. Noticing any sensations or tingling or anything that you're aware of from the top of your head all the way down to the tips of your toes. Or perhaps not aware of anything, and that's okay. Breathing into the whole of the body. Keeping that focus wide. Gently bringing yourself back to the screen. So gently wiggling your toes and fingers and slowly opening your eyes and just bringing yourself back. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part of that. So we've got some slides coming up here about mindfulness and being in the present moment. It's a really good picture here. Do you know why your dog is happier than you? And we've got a really good example of that. So we've got the human, head is full of everything. Dog, head is full of just, I guess, the things that it enjoys in life, just going to the park and being outside. So the dog is living in the moment, whereas often we find we are living in, you know, things that we need to do, things that we could have done, should have done, worrying about other people. We're often consumed with lots of other things, whereas actually we could take a leaf out of this dog's book. You know, just keeping things in the moment makes a huge difference to our enjoyment. Tom, are you okay to move to the next slide?
I thought I had.
Oh,
Has it come up yet?
yeah, it's got, yeah, it's gone to the next one. Yeah. Do you want to add to that one, Tom?
I mean, it's kind of exactly right. You know, quite often people are so caught up in, you know, everything that could happen or has happened, what they need to do, what they should have done. That it can take away from that being able to enjoy that moment. But even, I suppose, the dog's main distractions when it's at the park is the scent of other dogs. But again, that's still about being fully in the moment. It's about you using your senses to really engage with the present.
Yeah, thank you. Have you moved to the next slide, Tom? It's still.
Is it still the full
Yeah.
head? I've
we-
moved. Have you got the empty head?
Yes, we've got
Yeah.
the empty head now. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the one that often people feel that mindfulness or meditation isn't it? Is the fact that we should have a completely clear mind. We shouldn't be thinking about anything else, or anything at all. But it's what we see in the next slide that we really want to achieve.
It's about being in that moment. As Tom said, it's not about having a clear mind. I think people think mindfulness is about it's being able to completely blank out anything for long periods of time. It's actually not. It's being able to focus on what's there in your life at that moment, so you can get full enjoyment out of it and not being caught up with other things.
I mean, it's also, I suppose, because there will be distractions as well. You will have thoughts pop into your head. Your mind will wander, but it's being able to acknowledge those things, and like Nicholas said in the meditation, gently bring yourself back to the present moment.
Yeah. So we can also, practice mindful exercises, which is great, but you can also bring it into your day-to-day life by mindfully engaging in different activities. And that really is pretty much what it says it is. It's about being really mindful about everything that you do. You're not going to be able to do everything in your life mindfully. That's just not possible. However, you can bring it in different parts of the day. So whether that is, drinking a cup of tea, brushing your teeth, walking the dog in the park, whatever you're doing, trying to put your full focus onto that activity in that moment. So this can be done by adopting a curious and open approach to every experience that you've got. Do not think about what you've done during the day or what you may need to do next, but try to be fully present in that moment for that activity. So what I often suggest is choosing a couple of things that you do every day and trying to do those things mindfully. So some things that are normally part of your routine are really good to focus on, such as having your cup of tea or coffee, brushing your teeth, things like that. Really try to do that mindfully. And when you are doing this, it's really good to use your 5 senses in a generally curious way and pretend almost that this is the first time you've ever done this before. So noticing the smell, checking in what sounds you can hear around you, noting how it feels when you touch it, and if you have eaten something, how it tastes. So bringing in all your senses will really help you to be in the moment and almost ground yourself as well. And it stops you being taken off by worries about what's coming up later or what's happened in the morning. You can be in that moment and enjoy it as it is. So remember, if your mood is getting worse and you've noticed that your energy levels are slipping, this is the time you need mindfulness and behavioural activation the most. The irony of mindfulness meditation and behavioural activation is that often when we feel overwhelmed or exhausted and depressed, the first activities we tend to drop are the ones that usually re-energise us. Some activities make us feel nourished and some activities make us feel depleted. So it's really important when we are starting to feel this way that we look for the things that are going to give us energy and make us feel better, which is quite often things that we'll tend to stop, such as exercise or going out and doing things that's going to take up extra time. So it's really important, if you're starting to see any signs that you are feeling stressed that we've spoken about today, that's where you take action.
So, I mean, that's kind of all your content from us today. You know, a few bits on the screen in terms of if you have been affected or you would like any further support. There are services out there, and even with mindfulness, what I'd say is probably most of you have mindful moments throughout the day without realizing it, where you're just so involved in an activity you completely enjoy it. But it's then when we actually start to think, actually, this is really good, that we almost stop being mindful about what we're doing. So it's really trying to fully engage, like Nicola said, with your senses and just checking in with yourself.
So just to let you know a bit more about the service that myself and Tom are from, if you do feel that you relate to a lot of what we've spoken about here and you are struggling with stress or anxiety or depression, then please, consider contacting IAPT Talking Therapies, and the number is there on the screen. So it's 0300 999 1616. We are also online, so you'll be able to find us online, and you can self-refer online as well. If you feel like you need urgent support, then please contact the Integrated Response Hub on 0800 448 0828. And for free health and wellbeing support for NHS and social care staff, you can also visit strongertogethersupport.com as well.
I just want to say thank you, everyone, for joining us today. And I think, we're ready for any questions now, aren't we?
We sure are.
Oh, Nicola, thank you so much. That was a really interesting session, a whole wealth of information there. I think some new things for me. And I was going to say, if you're comfortable with it, we can circulate the slides to everybody that may wish to then pick up on some of those materials in their own time. So we can do that. I'll just remove you from the spotlight here so that we can bring other people onto the screen. It's a bit unnerving, isn't it, seeing yourself in big screen? At least I find that. And I guess some of the things that I was struck with whilst people are thinking of any questions they may have or comments to pose, and please do put them in the chat or raise a hand and we'll come to you in order. I guess some of the practical things that I was struck by in your presentation, so was the activity planning side of things. So certainly if people are like me, we have a very organized work life with things blocked into my work calendar. But I was thinking, to your point, I think, Nicola, well, actually, how often is it that I put something in at the weekend or in the evening, actually? So that really does seem like a useful technique, at least to me. And I know certainly Chris had put this in the chat. But yeah, surprising, isn't it, what impact breathing has on your mood and your feeling, and such a simple, cost-free solution, I guess. So I don't know whether anybody has any questions, but if you do, please do feel free to raise a hand or to put it in the chat, and we can pick those up now. The other thing I was struck by was just access to the service, Nicholas. So I think you were saying that people can self-refer. So unlike many services where you need to go to a GP, in this case we can just phone the number or go onto the website, can't we? Which is fantastic. Yeah. Okay, so I'm not seeing any. Chris, excellent, thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
We can.
Yeah, thank you again, Nicola and Tom. I've certainly been practicing mindfulness probably for the last 5 or 6 years, and the first session I went to, as you say, was under the impression it would empty our mind completely, whereas I sat there for half an hour thinking about this conversation, the work, worries about family or what we're going to have for tea, and actually I've learned, as you quite expertly and skillfully have said, that it's about observing your thoughts with curiosity, but without judgment. And I always try and describe mindfulness as putting a space between ourselves and our thoughts, our feelings and our reactions. And I think the other couple of comments really and reflections is that, if you like, the impact it has on our bodily, you know, on our chemistry, if you like, on the cortisol, the levels of cortisol, and the is it amygdala in the brain?
Yeah.
You know, about. I think it's worth stressing that is also really important, about how I believe the brain is the most powerful muscle in our body. We go to the gym to look after our physical health, which as a byproduct impacts our mental health. But how often do we stop? And I, like you, as you said in your presentation, I do the 7-11 breathing, but then follow it up with the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I call it emotional CPR, to the point that I think of 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 I can touch, 2 I can smell, 1 I can taste or feel. And in that way, it grounds me into the present moment.
Yeah.
I think the other perhaps question or thought would be that we do live in very difficult times. You know, the cost of living crisis is impacting on people. That if you think on the old Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you know, most of us probably on this call have a roof over our heads, you know, we have enough food to eat. And therefore, there are people who are anxious simply because of how they're going to put the next meal on the table. So I think we need to recognise the times that we're living in. For those people who are anxious because of social circumstances, and you know, one of the biggest impacts on people's emotional mental well-being, when we as a country pay a living wage, you know, just to unemployment and all of those issues. But it's when, correct me if I'm wrong, stress becomes distress, and that is a fine line, and it's different for all of us. It really is. So I like to describe myself as pretty resilient, but there are emotional triggers about my family which take me back to a place, you know, and not an easy place. But I, as someone who practices mindfulness, I just wanted to say thank you to you both for taking us through these exercises. And actually, this is a bit like going to the gym for our brain. It's, you know, it's been really good. But to just reflect on some of the things and points you picked up. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing that. Yeah. And I think your point about, you know, it's like going to the gym for the brain is really important. We give so much focus to our physical health, but very little to our mental health. So it's so worth spending that extra bit of time. We've had a couple of questions. We've got one from Mitchell Skelton about the waiting times. I'm guessing you mean for IAPT for that. So we're quite quick to book in for assessment. So if you make a contact or phone or go online referral, you'll probably be booked in for that initial assessment within about the first week. And then treatment after that. So our first level of support will be guided self-help. That's probably looking likely to start within about a few weeks after that initial appointment. Okay. Tracy's asked a question, Tom, about the mindfulness apps being advertised. Do you recommend these? Are they helpful?
I think so. When I first started practicing, probably about 4 years ago using an app, I initially used the Headspace app. You get 10 days for free, but then you have to pay. So we just repeated day 9 and 10 constantly for about a month. And then I started using one called Insight Timer, where you can set your own timer. But I think there's a recent one called Medito, which is kind of completely free. I thought I'd check it out if people are recommending it. And it seems to really nicely build you up. So actually it explains about mindfulness. You start very short sessions and gradually kind of build up to longer sessions. So it's about what works for you as well. I think there's a lot of ones. There's the Calm one, which I can't say anything about because I've never tried. But first 10 days of Headspace I'd recommend. And then the Medito one looks good from what I've seen as well. And it's just about finding that practice that works for you as well, building it into your routine.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of positive reports from the Calm app. I think there's free exercises and you do have to pay. I haven't paid for it, I don't know. I can't recommend enough YouTube. There's so much on there as well. There's loads of exercises, some thumbs up from Chris as well. So yeah, I often go on there. There's, you know, you can kind of put anything in and several different ones will come up. So YouTube's always good for free mindfulness exercises.
I think Mark Williams is great on YouTube. I used to accidentally get him mixed up with Richard Williams, the conductor.
Different experience, Tom.
Yeah, sent a lot of people to listen to the Star Wars soundtrack by accident.
As you mentioned his name, I was Googling him. The Mark Williams, who was a bit of a guru on mindfulness, he does a series of 5 meditations, and I think certainly I respond to listening to them. So it's not just an app, but just certainly before I go to bed, I try and tune into one of them. Or if I wake in the middle of the night, I'll use it. So it does differ, doesn't it, for different people? But there is a wealth of stuff out there on YouTube. Just little 5-minute videos. Certainly Mark Williams, who wrote a really powerful book called Finding Peace in a Frantic World. My goodness, you know, that it was, if you Google him, Mark Williams, there's a very good one on listening and thoughts. It's only, 8 minutes, you know, and so there's a lot of useful material out there.
Thank you, Chris. Tom, somebody's asked what the free app was called again.
I'll just put it in the chat.
Yeah.
So that one's completely free, and then I'll put.
It's great. And I guess one of the things that was occurring to me, Nicola and Tom, was often how difficult it is to make a change. So you might be thinking, yeah, this sounds great. I'm going to try that week planner thing or the breath thing. And it's tough, isn't it, to make a change? Have you got any tips to people that are trying one of these things afresh as to how to make it manageable and to sustain it? Is there anything that people could be thinking about in making a successful change or transition?
A couple of suggestions, really. So making the time, so planning when you're going to do it is good, but planning when you're going to do it alongside, I think Chris mentioned that he usually does it before he goes to bed. So something that you're going to do every day is good. So it becomes part of the new routine, or, you know, brushing your teeth and then go and do the mindfulness exercise. Or if you have a coffee at about midday at work, then follow that with a 5-minute mindfulness exercise, trying to link it to something that you do routinely most days. I think it would be a really good, so you kind of extend that routine with one of these exercises would be really helpful. Tom, would you add anything else to that?
And that's exactly how I would have answered the question. Yeah, it's I do mine post shower each day, and then say again, if I have a small break or after my lunch, then if I've got 10 minutes, then I'll just dip in. It's making that kind of habit and linking it into kind of make a routine of it, do it at the same time every day, and it just becomes the routine itself.
So we've got some comments here. Yeah, just suggestions what other people find are really helpful. So David Attenborough's soothing voice. Yeah, I would agree with that, definitely. Yeah, and other things that people use like white noise, music as well. So people will find different things relaxing, and that's fine. It's finding what works for you. I guess what me and Tom have been talking about is trying to change that physical stress response in your body, but actually listening to music is going to be equally as helpful as well. So this is quite an interesting one, Tom. We've got a question on any comments on exercise alongside mindfulness. So do we mean physical exercise with this question? Yes. Yeah. Okay.
So I think, go on, sorry, Nicola.
No, you go first, Tom, and I'll go after.
So I was going to say physical exercise is almost always going to benefit you if you're exercising within, I suppose, your physical capabilities at this time. I think I really enjoy playing football. When I'm playing football, you know, the whole world sinks away and I'm completely focused on football. So I suppose you can do exercise mindfully, but I'd never kind of shy away from doing physical exercise as long as it's within what you're currently physically capable to do. So I couldn't go and run a marathon right now. I could probably do a 5K.
But you can definitely bring mindfulness into exercise, so using your senses. So perhaps if you are, at the gym or walking or running, focusing on your breath, listening to that, listening to the sounds of your footsteps, listening to the noise around you if you're outside, or even if you're in the gym. So bringing your senses into that activity will make it mindful.
I think with David Attenborough, things someone mentioned earlier, I think Headspace did do a series of like nature things where you just watch like a monkey play for about 5 minutes. There's no kind of commentary. It's just watching them get up to, hijinks, and there's ones with lions and stuff. So you can be mindful with almost anything, really. If you enjoy it, it's probably going to be a little bit easier. But you can be mindful washing the dishes, mindful in the shower. There's a lot of sensory things going on there. I suppose it's considering when in your day would work best for you.
If I come in with another question that was occurring to me, and I guess it was your mention of the word noticing. And I thought, actually, so what if you don't notice them, but you maybe notice somebody else is exhibiting some of these symptoms? As you mentioned, I think telling somebody to calm down may not be the most helpful intervention, but thinking about those of us that are working with colleagues or potentially partners, friends, etc., that might be exhibiting stress symptoms, is there a way of intervening or supporting or assisting that you would recommend? Dangerous to generalize, isn't it? But any sort of tips that you might have to help somebody?
Yeah, it's a good question, Richard. And I'm sure we've all seen friends, family who've been stressed at some point or the other. But if we think it's possibly going on for longer than the situation that we would expect, then yeah, perhaps approaching them in a calm way and just saying, I've seen you're struggling a little bit. I've seen you've been like this, and that's not normally how you react. Are you doing okay? How are you feeling? So opening up that conversation. It might be that you don't get a great response the first time. Leave it a little while and then go back and try again. But you've opened that door, then they're aware that you've noticed, and then hopefully they'll come forward and ask for a bit of support if they need it.
Great, thank you very much. I think most of the questions now have been answered. So I guess we'll do a final call for any questions as we then move to close today's session. I just wanted again to thank you both, Tom and Nicola, for leading us through today and incorporating some mindfulness within the session. That was a real pleasant break actually from the rest of the day, so thank you for that. As I mentioned, we'll get the slides circulated after the session to those that attended. We have been recording today's session, as we mentioned at the beginning, so that of course will be available to everybody here and to colleagues and others that couldn't join us live to watch on catch up just as soon as we've processed that with our colleagues in the comms team. The other thing I was going to mention was this is part of a series of events that we're putting on for members. We've had several events already, and we've got some more coming up. So do look out on the NHFT website and in our member bulletins for details of future events. And indeed, if you've got some suggestions as to what would be useful or interesting for you in the future, do let us know at foundationtrust@nhft.nhs.uk. We'd be really pleased to get your thoughts about future sessions and equally your feedback on today. So I haven't seen any further questions pop up in the chat, which I would suggest is a good option then to close today's session. Thanks once again, both to Tom and to Nicola and to everybody else for coming along today. Really appreciate you carving out the time and hope it's been useful to you. Thanks very much and have a good day.
Thank you. Enjoy your afternoon, everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.